Good morning. My name is JD Kathuria of WashingtonExec. Welcome to our WashingtonExec video series. Today we're joined by Todd Stottlemyer, CEO and board member of CNSI. Welcome, Todd.
Good morning, JD. Thanks.
Let's get right into it. Our first question for you is, what impact has the civil unrest around our country had on you as a person?
Well, I think, to me, this is really a human rights issue, and it really goes to the core of our DNA about social and legal justice, equity and fairness. And, if we don't address the issues of racism in the United States, we're never going to reach the aspirational words in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. We're also never going to achieve our full economic potential as a country. So to me, I start with it as a true human rights issue. As a CEO, I say that Black lives matter and that all lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
Okay. What changes have you made at CNSI?
Well, let me talk maybe first. I'll talk a little bit personally about some of the things that I've tried to do, and then maybe talk about CNSI more specifically. Since in the last several months, I've really tried to speak out on issues of racism and discrimination. I've written several pieces about the 400 years of history since Black men were first brought to the shores of Virginia in 1619. And really, I've done this in the context of the protests today. I think it's really important for us to understand history as context for the current conversation. I think it's particularly important for all of us, but particularly white men and women, to call out racism, and whether it's actions or remarks, no exceptions whatsoever. And certainly that's something that's important to me and something I've tried to practice. Secondly, I think acting very humbly and actively listening to what Black men and women believe must be done to end racism and discrimination. I think it's very important for us to do that. And I've reached out to several of my Black friends to really listen to them and how we as a country fully confront legal injustice, social injustice, and racism and discrimination in the United States. I think also very importantly, I've reached out, as I said, to many of my Black men and women who are friends, and one of the things they said to me is that we figuratively need to go back to school, and they're really talking about me as a white leader to go back to school to more fully understand American history from the perspective of Black men and women. And I've done this. I've started this process, and frankly, I've learned a lot. We have a young Black man who lives with us, who we've been part of our family for the last several years. And I've learned a lot from him, listening to him during the protests that have taken place and how he sees the world as a young Black man in 2020. So I think figuratively going back to school is very important, from a personal perspective. And those are the things I've tried to do personally. From a company perspective, unfortunately, with the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and unfortunately others, I have, spoken very clearly to our employees. I've communicated with them several times. I think these are issues that are important for all of us. And I've tried to be very clear on my point of view that we've got to confront racism and discrimination in the United States. We've done some things. We celebrated Juneteenth. We closed our offices early, both figuratively and literally, because we're working remote, to celebrate Juneteenth. And we've said that we're probably going to most likely make that a holiday next year. So those are symbolism, types of things that we've done. We've also, from a company standpoint, we've really started to think about, what can we do to really live out a value statement when we talk about diversity and inclusion and respecting all employees. We have a senior management offsite coming up at the end of July. We're going to ask all of our senior managers to go through implicit bias training. For some folks, they've already been through it before, but we're going to ask them to do it again because we all have biases. And if we don't confront those biases and understand those biases, we're not going to make the type of progress that we need to make. After our senior managers go through this training, we're going to ask all of our employees to go through this training. We're also focusing very hard about how we become a more diverse management team and an employee population. I think it's very important that if you want to do this, you have to have a diverse pool of candidates. And so putting requirements in place that for any opening that we must have diverse candidates, gender, race, ethnicity, to fully promote a more diverse environment within CNSI and a more diverse population with CNSI. We're also focusing on mentoring, stronger mentoring programs, particularly for Black men and women in the technology space. They tend to be underrepresented, and mentoring and career advancement really go hand in hand. So we're thinking of how can we provide stronger mentoring programs. We're also looking at organizations to support organizations that promote Black men and women who pursue STEM degrees. Again, they're underrepresented in the technology space. In the past, I've worked with organizations like the United Negro College Fund and also with historically Black colleges and universities, and hiring individuals out of those historically Black colleges and universities. So those are some of the things that we've done to date. This is a journey. We're looking at other things, a value statement in terms of who we partner with, who we subcontract work to, and more than just from a compliance standpoint, but really, do the companies that we work with, do we partner with, do they fully espouse the values that we think are important around diversity and inclusion and respect in the workforce. So these are some of the things we've done. I think we've got a lot more work to do, but we've started in a number of these initiatives to really try to live out that value statement about being a truly diverse and inclusive workplace.
You're a well-known business leader in the area. What advice would you give to other CEOs who are also grappling with the same issue?
Well, I think, first of all, I think as a CEO, you have to decide, is this important or not? And to me, it's very important. I think secondly, do we really espouse diversity, inclusion, and respect in our workforces? And I think it's important for CEOs to make it very, very clear that this is a core value for the organization. I also think it's important for organizations, CEOs, to speak out. Companies are they're an accumulation of people. And companies, I think, have not only an obligation to provide returns to shareholders, but also to build really strong and just communities. I think back to Earl Williams, who was the president of BDM, my first CEO who I worked for. He had a great track record of providing outstanding returns to shareholders. And he also said that every senior person within the company had an obligation to be involved in the communities where we did business, to provide leadership in civic organizations, to speak out on important issues. So I think it's important that we do that, because we want to not only build a great community where we do business, we also want to have a just community where we truly, where diversity and inclusion really are part of our core values, and where respect for everyone is a core value as well.
Those are all the questions I had, Todd. Is there anything else you want to add that in terms of that we didn't cover?
I don't think so. I think we're at an inflection point in the country right now. I think it's important for CEOs as leaders of our companies and CEOs as leaders within our communities to speak clearly on these issues. I've said, and I will continue to say, that Black lives matter, and that all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. And certainly all lives should matter, but they can't matter until Black lives matter. So I think it's important that we say that very clearly, and then importantly, we back up our words with our actions.
All right, Todd, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.